Hello, I'm Cosmin, a 35-year-old marathon finisher, and I decided to share my experience as well as some tips for preparing and running a marathon. Why, you might ask, of course. The main reason, perhaps the only true reason I think this podcast is necessary is because there are many things that are just not being said on the internet, on various podcast vlogs or various preparation guides. I experienced things and processes before, during and after the marathon that I was not exactly expecting after doing a lot of research on the web and listening to many experienced runners about how to prepare for your first marathon. This is why I decided to do a brief, honest description of my experience and give you some advice that came out of this experience. Do not worry if you have already read a lot of stuff and listened to a lot of maybe much more experienced runners, because I will focus precisely on things that are not usually said. These things, by the way, will include not only optimistic encouragement or enthusiasm for running a marathon race, but also struggles or hard moments that are part of the preparations of running a marathon and of the recovery process. I strongly believe you should be aware of them, especially because everyone knows running a marathon is hard, and this is why actually it is such a great motivating thing. I do not think anyone regrets running a marathon, and because it is such an amazing and beneficial experience, it should also incorporate, and we should also recognize that it incorporates struggles and hardships that I will speak about. So, enough with the introduction, let's start. In part 1 of this podcast, I will speak a bit more of my experience in running, about how I prepared, and how my first marathon went, so that you can get a sense of who I am and what led me to share this experience and the set of advice. Spoiler alert, the marathon did not go as planned for me. Also, please stay until the end because I will also give you the very first important advice for anyone attempting their first marathon. Afterwards, in part 2 of the podcast, or in episode 2 if you want, I will give you another 10 tips and advice for preparing and running a marathon, making a grand total of 11. I have been a recreational runner for a few good years now, maybe 8 or 9, but never a very serious runner. My runs were easy 5 to 7 kilometers, about twice per week. Only about 2 years ago, actually when the COVID pandemic started, so I think that was in April 2020 for me, I started to run a bit more, up to 10 kilometers runs and 2-3 times per week. Then at the end of 2021, I also started to do trail running, taking advantage from the fact that I lived in Switzerland at the time, in the beautiful city of Zurich, where I had a hill very close. Occasionally I will also run more than 10 kilometers, also hills and steep slopes in my training. And in April 2020, I also did my first half marathon, which was run throughout Zurich. After this first marathon, I was very confident. I was like, okay, now we're on to something here with this running. The sky is the limit. Let's do more. Basically, while on maybe premature dose of optimism, I registered for the Bucharest International Marathon. That was held on October the 9th, 2022. But now I knew at the time that I was gonna live in Bucharest in the autumn, and in more than 5 months, until October the 9th, I had time to train and prepare for basically twice the distance of what I've just run, of the half marathon. Also, the half marathon I did was quite alright. I actually finished my 21.1 kilometers on a main bridge, on the slope of the bridge, and I felt very well. I ran down the bridge another like 200 meters before stopping, while also feeling that I had the energy for at least a few more kilometers. So this was another good reason for my optimism. In the following month, I did not, unfortunately, I can say now in hindsight, train specifically for a marathon. I rather tried to keep very active lifestyle. I running 2-3 times per week, also hiking a lot in Switzerland, biking, doing trail running. But then summer came and holidays came, which interrupted a bit my active lifestyle. all in all, it was only in August, so about 2 months before the marathon race, that I truly focused on preparing for the marathon. And I managed to do several long runs, which means for me runs over 15 kilometers or more. And I also did another 2 half marathons within 3 weeks and 2 weeks before the marathon. I felt very good in both of them. I also lost a weight. I was very confident going into the race. As a side note, I could speak in more details about how I use long runs and other specific runs like speed repeats in other videos if you guys will ask me for this. So if you want more from me, more videos, more podcasts, please make yourself heard by liking, commenting, or just saying hi in some way. I could also speak, for example, of the various gears I bought to help me a lot in structuring and keeping me motivating, such as the new pair of shoes, my Garmin watch, and so on. Gear is important for motivation, and maybe I will speak about this in a future podcast as well. So heading into the marathon race, my ideal goal was to run as close as possible to 4 hours. To run under that would have been very surprising, but I secretly thought about this as well. So the tactic I came into the race was to follow the pacers, running for a time of 4 hours and 15 minutes, which means a pace of 6.02 minutes per kilometer, and pick it up from there, see how I will feel. Even if I was a bit nervous at the start, of course, in the first part of the marathon I actually felt great. After 10 kilometers at the hydration point, I went a bit ahead of the pacers by mistake, but I just kept going, distancing myself progressively from the pacers. I was managing a good pace of about 5.5 minutes per kilometers and was really enjoying the race and the great atmosphere overall. At about kilometer 25, I started to feel a slight stomach pain immediately after I took a second energy gel mixed with water and isotonic drinks. Clearly my stomach was not used to the avalanche of drinks and gels that it had to digest, but it was also not a great inconvenience since the stomach ache got a little better relatively quickly in about 2 kilometers and I was still running well. This is until I started to rapidly feel more and more tired. From about kilometer 28-29 to about kilometer 34, I basically moved from being relatively okay to being completely dead. And by dead I mean my legs were hurting like hell, the general energy level was very low and the motivation went away as well. What happened is that I felt I hit the famous wall, which in running terms describe the moment many athletes feel at about kilometer 30-35, when all the sugar reserves in your organism are consumed and when your body switches from turning carbs to turning protein into energy, which is a slower process and basically means you run out of energy. I think what happens is also that the body gets a bit scared and goes into a full system alert to preserve itself. You can still run, probably for a long time. It's just that the organism tries to preserve itself and says it is scared. This is actually why it is so important to get your body used to this kind of effort and actually run more than 30 kilometers, which I did not do. Anyway, at this stage, the only good thing was that I was still okay with time. In spite of all the struggles, until kilometer 34, I managed to keep an average pace of under 6 minutes per kilometer, which meant a projected finishing time of under 4 hours and 10 minutes, provided I kept the same rhythm. But I was running slower and slower, and even if I was hoping, this did not help me recover. My legs hurt more and more, and this is why at kilometer 35 I took my first walking break. It was a short one, but unfortunately this also did not help me rest almost at all. After another kilometer, at kilometer 36, I took another walking break, and by that time I literally did not know how I could run 6 more kilometers. I was that tired. The pacers that I left at kilometer 10 caught up with me, and this was not very surprising. I was not upset to see them, but I was more surprised to see they were alone. Because at kilometer 10 we were a group of about 20 people running together. When we separated, they gradually left everyone behind, the pacers, and they were now completely alone and they looked very tired as well, actually. This actually motivated me a bit, and I followed them for about 2 kilometers until I reached around kilometer 38. At this time I had to walk again, only to realize to my horror that even walking was almost as painful as running. Definitely from about kilometer 38, 39 to 41, so 2-3 kilometers, I was in deep pain. These were the hardest, darkest moments of the marathon, and maybe the hardest things I have ever done in my life. Even now when I think about those moments, I get a little shivers throughout my body. From kilometer 41, I was actually too embarrassed to just walk, run, crawl to the finish line, simply because of the crowds at the finish, so I had to run and smile at everyone while crossing the finish line. In the end I managed to finish in a decent time of 4 hours, 25 minutes and 29 seconds and an average pace of 6.15 minutes per kilometers. It took me about 56 minutes to run the last 8 kilometers, which is an average pace of 7 minutes per kilometer, which now does not sound that bad, but it definitely felt very painful. After the finish line I was totally spent and quite emotional. I even started crying out of the blue while telling my wife about the difficult parts at the end, and even felt as if it was a bit of a traumatic experience. My legs hurt for the next 4 days. I did not sleep well for the first night or two, and I was generally feeling exhausted. At the same time, I felt grateful and enthusiastic. Running a marathon is such a unique experience, and running is such a great sport. I overall enjoyed the marathon. I want to do it again, and I absolutely do not regret running it. But still, I had to ask myself why I did not feel okay until the end. Why the experience of running my first marathon was not entirely a positive one. And this is where we come to my 11 tips and advice for a first-time marathon runner based on my experience, but also tips for someone who wants to improve their marathon experience. As I promised, I will end the first part of this video with the first tip, which is running a marathon is serious, hard stuff. First of all, you must know running a marathon is hard. For me, it felt as the hardest thing I have ever done. And for the last hour, as I told you, maybe an hour and a half, it was not enjoyable at all. You might feel pain like I did. You might need to push through pain. It is also an emotional experience. I started crying when speaking to my wife about how hard were the last kilometers. It was not that I was upset or felt pain. I suddenly became quite emotional, almost as an uncontrollable chemical reaction. And you also feel quite spent for days afterwards. Leg hurts at least a few days, and I also walked with difficulties for at least a few days afterwards. Experts recommend at least 1 week of total rest, but better 2 weeks if you're a beginner, before taking up only light jogging. This shows that a marathon really takes a toll on your body, and recovery takes a long time. And this brings me to an essential point. A marathon does not really make you fitter. It is not a healthy thing to do. It is rather an aggressive action on your body that you must very carefully manage with training and recovery. Training is healthy, running is very healthy, but not running 42 kilometers at once on an asphalt as hard as you can for around 4 hours or more. It is great to make a marathon a major goal of your year or season, to go out many times and run, to train and be motivated by an upcoming marathon race. But the race itself is extreme on your body. After it, you will not feel and be fitter, but need to recover and gradually take up again the running schedule. But while running a marathon might not be healthy, training for a marathon definitely is. I was in a way forced to change my lifestyle so that to progress in training I had to incorporate regular runs for many months before the marathons, and I also quit habits such as casual smoking. I drank less alcohol, slept more, ate more vegetables, and so on. A goal such as the marathon is a very powerful way to discipline yourself and improve your overall lifestyle. Also, what does not kill you makes you stronger, and what is hard is also worth doing and worth fighting for. This is why we are ambitious people, and this is why we are fighters, because we like hard things such as a marathon. I'm already thinking of the next marathon race, And also I'm thinking how fun it will be to prepare for it and to run tens of kilometers in various ways. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed listening to my experience and to my first marathon running tip. Please listen to the second part of this podcast as well, where I will be sharing further 10 important tips for having a great experience and a good time at your first marathon race. So see you soon.